Welcome to this Ragnorium beginner video where I share 5 tips that will help you play Ragnorium. This beginner video will assume that you have little to no previous experience playing Ragnorium. I have plans for later videos to discuss more advanced topics, so comment below if you think those will be helpful. These tips will not be in any particular order, so without further ado, let's get started. Tip number 1 is going to be construction area and zone designation. So when you start playing Ragnorium, you need to designate a construction area. This can be done by looking at the construction button over here at the bottom left, and you can see that you have your construction area right here. The first few areas are going to be free, but there's some things you need to keep an eye out for when deciding on your construction area. The first will be elevation. So ideally look for somewhere that has a relatively flat area. So this over here is to healing. So for example, this is done because as you build buildings or build bases, it will change your elevation. And if you have mixed elevation, it can be really difficult to build a building. Or a base, I should say. The next thing I should also point out is looking at world objects. Now I made that word up myself, and that pretty much just means anything like this over here, or this bit right here. These objects cannot be moved or removed in any ways. You have to build completely around them. So try and make sure you don't pick construction zones that have, or construction areas, sorry, that have these objects in them. The next thing to point out is zones. So in the construction menu down here, we have zone designation. Now zones are things that it's kind of like little areas that you mark out. So resource zone is somewhere where you gather resources. Now when it comes to construction, you can only build in the construction zone, so over here. But zones themselves, because they're just areas, you're not actually building anything, you can put zones wherever you want. So I would recommend making sure you don't use up valuable space inside your construction area and just use the zones instead. So I have my zones placed as close as I can to my construction area, but not in a place where I'm going to actually construct. Tip number 2 is going to be the resource menus. So the 8 icons you can see in the top left of your screen are the different resource menus. Unfortunately, Ragnorium doesn't actually explain what each menu is. And also one thing to note is that these menus up here will only show you resources that you have stored, which can either be in these resource zones right here, these resource zones there, or in storage containers which you unlock later in the game. This means that it does not show you resources that your clones have equipped. Only resources in storage. So let's talk about the menus. The first one is going to be your general menu. This shows you pretty much majority of the resources that you'll be using throughout the game, resources you can collect, and resources you'll be using for construction. The second menu is going to be your weapons menu. This will show you items that can increase your damage. I don't have any at the moment because all of them are equipped. The third menu will be your apparel, or like items that you can wear. Now these items might give you certain bonuses or buffs depending on what item they are. They can also help reduce damage depending if you can get like certain like protective equipment to wear. The fourth menu is going to show you medical items. So these include items that can recover your health, which is bandages, items that can bring your clones back from, stop them from bleeding out and bring them back to life, which is going to be your stem packs, and happy pills, which can increase your happiness, which is seen by this little marker right here. The next menu is going to be food. These are all items that you can eat, and this will be items that you need to combat the hunger bar over here in your status menu. The next menu, or the next resource menu, is going to be water. Again, likewise with food, instead of combating hunger, this is going to combat thirst. We also have the next menu, which is going to be farming. This is anything mostly to do with seeds or when you start growing resources, which will happen kind of like in the middle of the game, which is not really relevant right now at the start. And the final menu is something which I'm just going to call miscellaneous. It's like kind of like misc, so items that you need but kind of don't really fit in the other sort of core menus you have before. Tip number 3 is going to be quantum computer and research. So research is an extremely important mechanic in the game of Ragnorium, which allows you to unlock pretty much everything, or majority of things anyways. So with research, I would recommend having 0 downtime. So always have something researching, and this is your little research menu down here, which you can go over here, click research, or you can find the research menu by clicking this button down here. It'll lead you to the same place. Now research has a few things happening. As you can see, it has a quantum computer at the top. It has the level that you're at, and different levels will allow you to unlock different research things. Your life, which is the health of your quantum computer, and also your hash speed, which is the speed of your research, which you can increase by getting certain buffs and certain items. Now, research, I would strongly recommend what you do is you want to equip this quantum computer. So this is your quantum computer earlier. So if this thing loses its life, you will pretty much lose the game because you don't have access to research. Now it can lose its life by being in water or rain or being attacked. So what I would strongly recommend is as soon as you start the game, pick a clone which you want to hold your research, your quantum computer, and equip it. So the way you do that is by picking a clone. So let's just say I want Lily to hold my computer. I can go to Lily, click on profile, you go to equipment, go to portable slot, and as long as your clone is within a reasonable distance, so close proximity, you can click on portable slot and it will have quantum computer right there. Now, as you can see, the clone isn't actually going straight to pick this up, so what I can do is speed that up by going cancel your immediate task, and please pick this up right now. Thank you very much. And now the clone will carry this quantum computer on their back, and also I can make them research later on to speed up the research. Tip number 4 is going to be combat. So previously I've mentioned bleeding out. Now bleeding out occurs when your clone's health drops to 0. When this happens, you'll have a selected amount of time to revive your clones, and if you don't revive your clone within that time, your clone will be permanently dead. It's also important to note, as soon as you're dropped down, or as soon as you start bleeding out, if you do revive your clone will come back, but it will have a permanent debuff. This debuff can only occur once after your clone kind of drops. I don't want to say dies because it doesn't actually die, and so every other death after that will not add a further debuff, but it's important to know that you want to avoid death as much as possible, or bleed out as much as possible, so you minimize the amount of debuffs that you get. Now, this bleeding out process is most likely going to occur during combat. Now, there's a few things to say on combat with Ragnorium. So in Ragnorium, there's a few effects that help kind of modify combat, and those would be weapons, which increase your damage. Those would be certain items or buffs or skill capsules, which I'm not going to touch on skill capsules just yet, but those can decrease the damage you receive. But outside of that, there's no other mechanics in Ragnorium. It means there's no such thing as high ground, and there's also no such thing as flanking. So you don't have to worry about that. It's a pretty simple, like, 1-to-1. You hit the enemy hits you, you'll deal damage, you'll receive damage. Whoever, gets to 0 damage first dies. That being said, there are a few things that you can do to help improve your likelihood of living, or just to improve your combat in general. And the main thing I would say is focusing on enemies one at a time and killing one enemy before moving on to the next one. It's also important to note aggro range, which aggro range is essentially the range or the distance in which enemies will attack you. So Ragnorium doesn't actually show you the aggro range, so I can't hover my mouse on an enemy and see how close I need to move. The easiest way to find this is to incrementally move or slowly move up to the enemy and wait for them to attack you. So as soon as they start chasing you, there we go, we're in range. So I can run all the way back, and this enemy should chase me all the way right here. And it's important when you do this, try and pull enemies away from other groups. This will allow you to take enemies out one at a time, and it will greatly increase your likelihood of survival. The final tip number 5, is going to be regarding objectives. Now, this is really important because objectives are going to be the thing that will most likely lead to your defeat or deaths of your clones. Now, completing objectives is really important because it rewards you with a powerful resource known as influence. You can see your influence at the top over here, and if you complete your influence, you can use it for world events, which happens throughout the game at certain times. Also, you need 8 influence to get a new launch, and a new launch is your primary way, or the only way you can get more clones and certain upgrades. Now, objectives, there are many different types of objectives, but the main type you'll have is either investigation or defeat. This means you have to investigate a certain area or defeat a certain enemy. So for example, this objective right here, I've clicked on Shrine of Fire. As soon as you click this objective, you'll have this little menu that appears on the bottom right. You have the description of what the objective is. You have like a party selection, which is going to be how many clones you can take. So we have 2 for this example. You're also going to have a little cross or an X. You press this button to cancel the objective. It's important to note that cancelling objective will give a morale loss, or slightly decrease the happiness of your clones. And if your happiness drops to 0, you have negative effects as well, so be careful of that. And you have this little location marker, which if you click, it'll take you to the location of your objective. Now, another thing to note is this pink line, and this will normally go from your base or your quantum computer to the objective. So this kind of just shows the path you have to run. So what's important to note here is that if you play the game, or at least use this as it's intended, what you would do is you would click on this, you would pick 2 people, right, select these 2 people, you would press play. As soon as you press play, actually I'll show you. So press play, these clones will gather to the same location, and they will automatically start running towards this objective, and they will defeat any enemies on the path to the objective. As soon as they get to the end, they will complete the objective. Now, this is really bad because what happens is your clones are automatically moving, and you can't actually control them in any way whatsoever. Now, the reason this is bad is that there's going to be many potential avoidable deaths that your clones will run into, because they're just going to run straight into these enemies kind of like head on without taking the advice that I gave in tip number 4, which is going to be aggro range. So what I would recommend is, okay, I'm only doing this for the example, but cancel this. And what you want to do instead is, let me go back to objective. It was Shrine of Fire, which, sorry, you can also find by clicking the objective menu right here. And that's how you complete that. And you want to manually run them yourself. So say I want to take these clones anyway. Right, I'm going to manually run you to where I need to go. you want to pull the enemies one at a time, or at least defeat them in a way that makes sure you don't die. And then after you do that, then do the same thing. Go to play and pause, or go to your party selection, and then complete the objective. Yeah, this is a different example because I got relatively lucky with these worms already spreading up. But in like much higher and more difficult objectives, you're not going to be given this easy chance, and you're going to need to be a bit more strategic about how we complete your objectives. So let's just say I want to take one person. You only need one to complete an objective. I'm going to give you a bonus tip, which is that as soon as you complete objectives, try and gather whatever resources you can before you head back. Because again, once you get to certain or the more advanced parts of the game, the objectives won't actually be this close. They're going to be much, much further. And if you can gather the resources that you have around the objective before you go back to your base, it's going to just help you be a lot more efficient. So complete the objective by clicking on it. Go over here. Gather this, please. Make sure they pick it all up. Another bonus objective, or bonus tip to give, sorry, is that with the objectives, it has different colors. So as you can see over here, we have dark blue ranging from light blue to yellow to red. Now it's important to note that the easiest objectives are dark blue and the most difficult are red, with yellow kind of being the middle ground. So in some ways, if you don't know what to do, try and aim for the darker blue objectives first, then go to light blue, then go to yellow, then go to red. Now that just gives you a bit of an idea of what you might want to achieve if you haven't done these objectives just yet. And that concludes this beginner video sharing 5 tips for Ragnorium. Comment below any tips that you think that will help others or that I may have missed. Let me know in the comments if there's any specific Ragnorium content that you want to see. Foxyl out. Peace. Take care.